Special meeting of the Apache Junction City Council to order. We just need to go to roll call.
Mayor Surtee,
Here.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Here.
Councilmember Barker,
Here.
Councilmember Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Rizzi,
Present.
Councilmember Struble,
Here.
Councilmember Waldron.
Here.
All members present. You have a quorum, Your Honor.
Consideration for approval of resolution number 18-17, fully adopting estimates of expenditures of the City of Apache Junction for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018 and ending June 30th, 2019, declaring establishment of the budget for the City of Apache Junction for fiscal year 18-19 and declaring an emergency. And this will be City Clerk
Right.
or
Right.
Your Honor, thank you, Bryant Powell, City Manager. The 2018-19 final proposed adopted budget is before you as a public hearing. We've gone over this in a couple of different settings, and we are here to answer any questions. Our staff is here and available. This has been a huge effort, as always, with our department directors. The budget, since we last met, has been placed online, the proposed budget, and we will continue to have every line item out there for our residents to see. No major changes since the last time we've met on this. In fact, Matt, I'm not aware of any changes. And we are available for any questions you may have or thoughts or ideas.
any questions or discussion from the council? Don't see any. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to talk on this issue? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close. Oh.
As far as your budget, I've already said.
Could we get your name and address?
George Schroeder, 2444 West Virginia, Apache Junction. I've already stated my concerns. I think a lot of residents have the same concerns. We need to separate ourselves in the budget from the mental health system completely. They get their budgets and their charter from the county. Has nothing to do with us. You want to be nice, that's great, but you're putting it in your budget. I don't see that as right. Two, I've talked and I get the same, believe it or not, I get the same briefings. I'm not going to tell you how or why, but I get the same briefings as Mr. Hazel. He's got nothing from the Superior Court, Supreme Court, or any other court regarding we need to have more people in our community serving their time when most of these complaints should have been a federal felony to begin with. I've told you that before, as well as the FBI and the DOJ. Again, that should not be in our budget. I understand we need cleanup. The bids are out there. That's the way it works. But as far as these people cleaning up our neighborhoods, yeah, really? I don't want to see more crackheads and retards in our community when you're giving them jobs in our community. So I'm going to see them twice and 3 times. I don't think anybody wants to see that. And one of your complaints before you were mayor, Mr. Surtee, is we don't want these people here, but here you are. Why aren't you convincing these other people that we don't want these people in our neighborhoods? Okay? I'm seeing more of them in my neighborhood, despite Mr. Kelly's efforts to get rid of some of them. And
Your Honor, point of order, this is about the budget.
it is the budget. It is the budget. It's the mental health budget. And the judge's request for money for that. It should be separated. I have a couple things I'm going to do. And it will hopefully stymie or stop any part of being in that budget. And I understand, and I just read it in the paper, so I could be wrong. I'm going to understand that these community services are taking direction from Mr. Powell, the city attorney, the city manager. He shouldn't be in it either. These courts have nothing to do with our streets and lawbreakers, just putting them out in our community, trying to save a couple dollars here and there. You want money? Apollo Investment Corporation. There's your money. I've already talked to Ms. Evans about that. I think we need to separate ourselves from the mental health issues with our budget and the community services with our budget. It's not worth it. Anyway, thanks.
Would anyone else like to speak? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any more discussion? And I'll call.
I just have a comment, Your
Yes.
Honor. I've been contacted by people that have had court fees that were stressing because they couldn't afford to pay the court fees and were appreciative because they were given an opportunity to work those fees off. Without paying those fees, they get in bigger trouble if they pile up. And so, to the contrary, I've heard people be thankful that they had, the city's giving them an opportunity to help invest in their community, help clean up their community, and help pay their fines and their fees off at the same time.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. I'd just like to state, I really appreciate everything that the staff has done to prepare this budget. And I think it's a well-put-together budget that's going to be reflective of where we're going to go, or where we are going in the future, and preparing us for that. It's one of those things that it's incumbent upon us as the city council and the staff to look for and build the community so that we can generate more revenue without increasing fees, without increasing sales tax. And that's a big issue that we're going to have to tackle here in the future years to come, especially with the additional restraint that the city, or excuse me, the state and the federal government is putting upon municipalities. And so it's going to be very important for us to remain our commitment to being a very effective and efficient city. So I'd just like to express my appreciation to the staff for what they're doing, and look forward to working with you in the future on building Apache Junction.
Thank you.
I just want to say it was very efficient this season, so.
Okay.
I will call for a motion.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move that resolution number 18-17, fully adopting estimates of expenditures by the City of Apache Junction for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018, and ending June 30th, 2019, declaring establishment of the budget for the City of Apache Junction for fiscal year 2018-2019, and declaring an emergency be approved.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Rizzi,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Struble,
Yes?
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Waldron,
Yes.
Mayor Surtee,
Yes.
unanimous, Your Honor.
Then I will adjourn the special meeting and call into order the work session of the City Council. Roll call.
Mayor Surtee,
Here.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Here.
Councilmember Barker,
Here.
Councilmember Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Rizzi,
Present.
Councilmember Struble,
Here.
Councilmember Waldron.
Here.
All members present, you have a quorum, Your Honor.
Discussion on the city's Health and Human Services Commission duties as prescribed in the Apache Junction City Code, Volume 1, Article 2. Robin.
Yeah, I brought this up because after we had several pretty heavy discussions about health and human services, as I looked over their duties, quote unquote, I discovered that out of the 5 duties that they were given originally, they're actually only doing 2. So I feel like the council needs to make a decision. What do we want the Health and Human Services Commission to do, to accomplish, et cetera? We want them to look over applications for funding, yes, but do we want them to do more than that? The folks that are on the commission have contacted me. They would like to do more than that. And so I feel like we as a council need to decide what we want them to do, what is legal for them to do as far as a city commission is concerned. So that's why I brought it forward.
What are the ones that you consider them not doing right now?
They are not conducting public hearings to determine the needs of city residents with regard to public health. They are not enhancing the development of public health through public forums. They are not assisting in the development of healthcare facilities. Now, the development of healthcare facilities is probably one thing they can't do, more than likely. But it appears to me that they certainly could have public hearings, that they certainly could find out from residents what the need is in the community, and perhaps in doing that, one of the, not complaints of anything, anyway, one thing that was brought up was that the same agencies continued to apply. Well, perhaps if this commission were to do a little more, i.e. hold public hearings, i.e. talk to people, et cetera, perhaps we would have more agencies apply. And also there are some other problems with the Health and Human Services. I think that several of the organizations have talked to Bryant about it, and I presume we're trying to get to the bottom of some of that.
In your time here on council and as a citizen and board member, have they ever had hearings like that?
They have never had hearings, have they, Kathy?
I'm not sure what you mean by hearings.
Public hearings other than the hearings with the organizations that are applying for funding?
No, but let me give you an idea of what they have participated in.
Okay,
In 2006, the then members of the commission participated in the Apache Junction Wellness and Health Care Assessment meetings.
okay.
You know, and those, there was a series of meetings, you know, on a
Yeah, I
variety of
remember
health
those.
issues.
Yeah,
In 2000, actually started in 1998, when the Dr. Siegel opened the Advanced Cardiac Specialists, which is now Banner Goldfield. He asked for their input on that. Then also when Dr. Siegel opened what was then called the Arizona Regional Medical Center in 2010, they participated in that. He asked for input. In 2012, they were asked for input on what was then proposed to be a hospital excise tax.
oh, I remember that, yeah.
Okay. In May of 2013, actually from 2012 to May of 2013, they were asked by Banner Goldfield for input on that particular healthcare facility. So they have had participation. Oh,
Okay.
one more. In 2010, they were asked for input on the Superstition Mountain Mental Health Care Center that was being proposed at that time.
So they actually have done the one that I thought they hadn't done at all, and that is assist in the development of healthcare facilities.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, and it kind of has to be an invitation
right,
basis.
absolutely.
so-
Yeah, I was on that board for
Yep.
Banner
Yep.
when they did that. But as far as just holding public hearings, finding out what's going on in the community, I know that several of the members of the commission over the years have asked me if they could not hold, you know, public hearings, if they could not have some kind of a health thing, maybe join with the city in the health fair that goes on, maybe do some stuff like that. In other words, they don't feel as though they're being utilized.
Sure.
They feel as though they could do more and would like to do more.
When they do meet, where do they meet?
They hold their meetings in the conference room in my department,
Which department?
in my office, which is open to the public.
But that's not a very public, who would even know how to get in there? Maybe we could get them.
Well, I wonder about doing it here.
Here or the old city hall, and maybe make it a little more public might be a good idea.
Well, let me just offer, as we start to think about, these are already here, the cameras, we have Legistar, we're gonna be moving towards action minutes and recognizing that the video and the audio is the verbatim minutes. I would recommend that all of our boards and commissions start to think in those terms. We've got the system, we've invested in it.
If this room's not being used,
Right.
then why meet at the other place?
Absolutely, I agree. And what would the council like to see that commission do?
Well, I know, me for one, I'd like to take some time to kind of think about it.
Okay.
It's an excellent question.
And I understand that, yeah.
And perhaps if they had more public meetings, they might get feedback from the public on what the public wants to see as well.
Excellent idea also. However, they do not have another meeting until they get the the applications next January. So their question, of course, is what can they do in the meantime? I guess my suggestion is, could we think about this? Could we then bring this back? Bryant, you're working on several things that have to do with this, and I would like to hear how that's going here in the future.
So tomorrow night, you'll start to see some of the first evidence of that in your contracts as it relates to how the food bank views their contract, and hopefully
And
that
their
process
clientele?
improvement. What's that?
And their clientele.
And their clientele and the location, all that. So we're hoping that those changes that Joel and Kathy and we've worked on should help that process. So that's a start. And then, I don't know, Kathy, is there any reason why they couldn't
No, as a matter of
start,
fact.
even without direction? I mean, just start doing what their
No,
code
as
says.
a matter of fact, the new chair, and I spoke.
Erickson, is it
af-
Mary
yeah,
Erickson?
Mary Erickson,
Yeah.
and there are 3 members of the commission here.
Yes.
She and I spoke after their last meeting, and she's interested in convening them in the fall,
Excellent,
just for the purpose of discussing what other things they can do.
excellent.
And then we can return and report,
Yeah,
like on
yeah,
a,
if we could hear back how that's going, and I'm sure that Mary will probably get in touch with one of us and let us know how that's perking along, and if any of the council comes up with another thought that they would like to have this commission do, let them know. I know they want to do something. They don't want to just sit there.
Meet once a year.
Yeah, and meet once a year.
So
Okay.
we could include them in all of the wellness partnership events and that the city has throughout the year, to be there in some capacity, if not just for information that you exist.
they're an existing board and commission
Mm-hmm.
that has
Are here
rights,
to help.
authorities, responsibilities already codified, and can start, sounds like, looking at different ways and means to get information.
Excellent.
So if they were to meet here, would that mean that they would be conducting, would that include conducting the interviews
Absolutely,
of the applicants? That would be
absolutely.
great.
That would
It
be
be-
wonderful.
It would be
Yep.
wonderful, because
Yeah.
it does seem like it's a well-kept secret,
Yeah.
and it's just a very, not even a handful that are applying. There may be others that, for whatever reason, others that aren't applying, saying they're not aware. I think that would be very helpful.
I could also see that the monies that they get are out of our budget, but if it is more of a public process, you might actually see more donations to the groups that they are discussing,
Absolutely.
because they'll be exposed as a need, and then maybe somebody, I didn't know there was that need, then maybe the money just starts to appear that way also, so that's another peripheral that could come out of it.
Definitely.
Anything else on this?
So when this happens, when the Health and Human Services Committee starts to meet more regularly, is the city clerk's office the staff that would be assisting with anything, or is there other
Well,
staff members?
if you're going to expand to wellness events, that would also involve parks and recreation.
Absolutely.
But I guess I'm asking, the city clerk's office would be the representative, like Parks and Rec has Parks and Rec, Planning and Zoning has Planning
Yes.
and Zoning. You would be the
Yes,
representative department that would be handling
yeah, it would be, we
everything.
would be the liaison to the commission.
that.
Correct.
I think this is a great thing to go forward with. This is exactly what we should be doing. This is exactly what, not just Health and Human Services should be given. They already have the authority, they already have the abilities to do all these, all 5 of these. And, right, if we can think of some other things that they can move forward with. But I would also like to charge the committee members to also think out of the box and to come to us with ideas that they think that they might be able to do other than these 5 things. To expand that, to make sure that, just as Mayor Surtee said, to make the awareness out there so that people understand the need, and the people of our city would be more willing and able to address the issues that come forward through these hearings that are going to be held to find the needs of the city and the citizens.
Okay,
So
thanks.
what is the next step?
So from my understanding, we're magnifying what we should have already been doing existing in the code, and we don't need direction of staff or anything like that. This is up to our
Our
board there, and they know the code.
board
and-
president
yeah.
can call a meeting.
Mhm.
She
They-
has that authority right in the code.
And they can call meetings monthly or whenever they want? I mean, it's
Call it
not like,
whenever they want to.
so, okay, cool.
I wanted to add one thing. They also were asked way back when the enabling ET transportation program first started, they were asked for their input on that also.
Yeah.
That eventually became right choice.
Is this the type of a commission that has a quorum problem like all the others?
Joel?
Yes, this would be, if you're going to have open meeting, it'd be an open meeting, and yes, you would have the quorum issue.
Well, there's 5 members. We've got a quorum.
Right, but they're not meeting right now.
I know, but what I was saying was that there are not as many people that need to be there. And my understanding of your question was, would they not have enough to have a meeting?
Yeah,
They would definitely need a quorum to meet, yes.
but they can't meet every week, these 3.
No.
No,
Okay. All right, we're ready to move on?
Yes, sir. Thank you, council, for your input. I appreciate it.
Discussion on proposed amendments to Apache Junction City Code, Volume 1, Chapter 3, Administration, Article 3-7, Procurement Procedure. Mr. Stern.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. In your packet, you should find a memo from me dated June 7th regarding this matter. I want to say, that the way this started, I was asked by the city manager to look into possible changes to the procurement code because of complaints about the unworkability of the current code. This code was adopted, or the old one was adopted in '04, I believe, and that was the last change we made to it. Since then, a lot of things have changed. And so I started out with first talking to Heather Hodgman, because she's the one who has a real familiarity with the code. And then from there, we blossomed out into a huge team. So almost every department had input on this matter. It overlaps kind of with the water district on how the water district wanted to change the current levels. And so what you have before you, and you have not directed staff to do anything yet. However, I was asked by the manager to bring these forward for you to consider. And I won't go and read every single line, but the major differences are the dollar amounts. Right now, it's procurement's less than $25,000, but at least $1,000. That would be stricken, and that would be procurement's less than $5,000. And no quotes would be needed for that, so it'd be an outright purchase for less than $5,000. Procurements of $5,000 but less than $10,000, that would be a new category, and city staff would need 3 informal written quotes. And there's a definition of what an informal quote is. An email, fax, or other hard copy directed to city staff member and fully documented by such staff member. The next category would be, and also a new one, that would be procurements of $10,000 but less than $50,000. And what would be needed would be 3 formal written quotes. A formal written quote, new defined term, a hard copy on official business letterhead and with signature of vendor directed to city staff member. And then finally, the category of procurements of $50,000 or more, and that would entail the full bid process. So those are the big things that the city staff would like changed. And then within the code, there's some other definitional changes. There's also some changes to the exemptions. Some things that just should not be procured in the normal way. And there's some new changes. And I'll just mention some of them: administrative or appellate hearing officers, bond and municipal improvement district consulting, entertainers, fireworks, indigent defense attorneys, and then there's a bunch of other ones. Other than that, everything else is kind of clerical except for the bid protest and appeal. We're adding language that over time should have been in there anyway, on how the manager shall consider the circumstances of the procurements for the appeal, and what would happen if if something went wrong with the solicitation, what the manager could do. Also, there's a new section called online bidding, because that is the sign of the times. A lot of the work that Heather does for the Public Works Department is online, and a lot of cities and towns are doing that. Same with counties and the state. There's also a new ethical standard in violations. Common sense kind of things, but sometimes common sense is not practiced very widely, and so those things need to be in the code. And then finally, there's something regarding upfront cooperative and piggyback purchasing. And what that means is, if, say, another city did a contract or had a contract with another vendor, and they made it widely available for other cities to use, we could essentially use that same bidding process, because it's already been procured, and we could use their contractor. Those are the big things involving this, and this is just for discussion. And at one point, if you want to make some changes, we can come back for another work session, and then we could also come back to direction to staff, and we'll make some changes and then put it in ordinance format.
So you had a couple ifs there, so then what do we want to do?
Well, right now it's a policy discussion on what you'd like to see in this, and I know you haven't had a lot of time to look at this, and we could bring it back for another work session if you'd like, if you have any interest in going forward with it. But at one point, we would need direction to staff.
Yeah, so our thought was to give you an opportunity to review this. This is the pre-direction to staff time. To review this, we haven't done this in 14 years. A lot has changed with being able to have what's expected to be competitive in the vendor world, the ability to have access and be able to compete. We want to have the best bids, the best pricing available. We want a procurement code that meets those standards. And so we've asked staff and challenged staff to present that. The reason this came up was when we went through this for the water district about 8 months ago, you all said, can we consider this? And so we've been working on that. That's this initial product and discussion. My kind of thought is in a month or two, whenever we come back and get together again in a month, to have it on for direction of staff and give us insights tonight or even throughout the month on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to see it come back. You know, one of the things that I've talked about before was that $25,000 limit was so low.
Mm-hmm.
It was approved in the budget. Staff had to take time for presentations and things like that. So after reading through this, which is very enjoyable, by the way, I like the limits the way they're set now, particularly, you know, when the 25,000 was set, how many years ago, you know, things have changed, prices have gone up and so on and so forth. So I would like to see it come back.
I would too. I agree.
Definitely.
One of the things that always comes up during bids is, can we use local vendors and can we give them preferential treatment? Is there anything in here that addresses that, and anything that we can circumvent those discussions for?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, there's a case called the Circle D case, and that case is still good law, and basically that outlawed the statute that said you could have a local preference. You will hear from different people, well, that's really not the law anymore, but as far as I'm concerned, it is. And I've consulted different city attorneys, different county attorneys, and essentially if you have such a process that is in violation of that case. So I don't think you can do that. However, if you set some of the limits that we have, that might take care of some of the issues. I think some of the park and rec purchases, for example, are usually small amounts. But under the current rules, they still have to be procured to a certain degree. But if it's less than $5,000, not so. So I'm not going to say it's a built-in preference for local vendors, but not having to procure certain things that are less than $5,000 does help.
So on the, let's say a hardware item, we can go to one of our hardware stores and not go to Lowe's and Home Depot.
If it's less than $5,000, yes,
Yeah.
you don't need to go and make phone calls, hey, what would you charge for this, and get 3 different written bids. You don't have
Because
to
even
do
if
that.
it's cheaper, by the time you figure driving to Lowe's, you might as well just go to one of our hardware stores anyway.
Depending on the value, yes.
I have a question for Bryant. Hasn't that kind of been the practice of staff, is to shop local?
We encourage that.
Yeah.
That is a practice and policy. And of course, we try to factor in all the aspects that Joel kind of alluded to, which is what's practical and drive time and sales tax, all of that into the cost mechanism. So yes.
So what timeline are we looking to bring this back?
So I was thinking the second meeting in July, which we're anticipating not being back for the first meeting in July, for council direction to staff, which is another opportunity to still talk about it. And then we would take another
Can you move? I'll be here.
month or so. I'm not sure how long before it would be in for change.
Be July 16th for a work session?
I'll call in,
I don't know why we'd need a work session though.
because I got nothing else.
Well, it depends if you just want to talk about it, and then you could set it for another, well, you wouldn't set it, we would set it for another time to bring back, but it's up to you on how fast what your pace is on this.
Why
There's no
couldn't-
terrible hurry, I don't think.
I was thinking July 17th for council direction to staff.
Yeah, why couldn't, I mean,
You could, but I
Yeah.
heard also you could do a work session between that time. The manager wants to go forward, you take his recommendation to do that, but also it's up to you if you want more time to read this. Because I think you mentioned that also, Bryant.
So just so for process-wise, let's say we do this and we give you guys the direction of staff and you guys come back, is there, and we approve this policy, does it take effect, the changes in this policy, does it take effect the night of we approve it, or is there a,
No, what would happen is if you gave direction to staff, we'd bring back an ordinance
yeah,
that would essentially put this into the code. And then you could either do an emergency action, or you could make it for the usual 30 days. So it would usually it'd be 30 days.
30 days?
Yeah, because I mean, emergency, I don't know if I see an emergency here. We haven't worked on this for 14 years, so I don't know what the
No,
emergency
it's
is.
not no, I didn't know if it was like a 6-month wait or 30, it's a 30-day
No, well, actually,
wait.
you could set the time limit too.
Yeah.
You could say, well, we want this to go into effect in 6 months, or you can say in
30
2
days.
months, but it has to be at least 30
30
days
days.
if you don't use the emergency clause.
Yeah. And so, I mean, are you guys open for questions tonight, or is that what you got?
We do have some staff here tonight.
Is that what we're setting? I just have a
That
couple.
would be great. I would love to get going on the questions now, because
Okay.
I was looking at July 17th for council direction of staff, and then depending on which meeting in August, and then it would be 30 days after. I already have part of the organization working off a procurement code that you approved with the water district.
Water district,
Yeah.
right. No, I just had some questions. I had some grammatical questions, and I went to my daughter, who's a 3rd grade teacher, and she says, "Dad, you're not in South Dakota anymore. You don't talk that way." So she corrected me on those. But on the on page 8, under the exemptions, and there's a whole, are we, I guess my question on those, are we, is there, do we have to list them out like that? Or, because there's one in there that's economic and environmental assessments. Isn't that what we just, I don't know, it was 2-3 months ago where we did that, the transportation study contract? It was, would that fall under that particular exemption, so we wouldn't have to do a bid for that type of service?
Well, if you're talking about, I don't know which one you're talking about, but if you're talking about,
The one where we spent $200,000, $140,000 of ours, and $160 of federal government to plan
Larry's,
the
MAG
the
one.
bicycle.
was that a grant?
140 was a grant.
Yeah, if that was a grant, if that was a grant, and I believe it was, Brian just said it
Yeah.
was,
The 160 was.
then there's probably some federal rules that say you have to bid it out.
Oh, okay.
And so I would think that one would fall under their rules, because
Okay.
you're getting some free money from them, and you don't have to put in too much.
Yeah, and then like the CPA, if we were to choose, I don't even know, I can't remember what our contract for the audit is, but it's not, it's under 50, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. But I guess my question on this is, are we limiting ourselves? Do we have to list every one of those to make the exceptions, or is there a different way to do it so that we don't limit ourselves? I don't know how else to say
It's-
this.
It's best to list, because that way there's no question
There's no
on whether
question about it.
there's discretion.
Okay,
Because that's when you get into arguments with certain vendors saying, well, it's not listed, so you
Yeah.
have to do an RFP.
yeah, and so if they're listed there, that means unless it's affiliated with some kind of a grant or something that the federal or state agency requires us to put it out to bid. If the exemption is on here, then we can do it without going to bid.
Correct. Also, Title 32, or I'm sorry, Title 34, that's construction contracts.
Yeah,
That you cannot list as an exemption,
Okay.
because state law has already acted in that manner.
okay. And then down in number B, which, the licensing relating to software and tangible, public property, does that include, I'm just thinking about our accounting software that we're, trying to, purchase and implement, and, it was a pretty sizable amount.
Yes, relating to license
Yeah,
and maintenance, so that's the type of software that could be different types of software, including the PD software, the finance department or HR type of software.
those are both, the accounting one is, I forget, 250 to 300,000 we budgeted, I think.
That's somewhere around there.
And-
But sometimes, even though it's on the list, you might say, you know what, let's do an RFP, because we might get a different idea of what this should be.
Okay, so even though this is the exemptions, it lists the exemption, we could still ask
Correct.
for bid.
Absolutely.
Because- Okay, I'm just making
Absolutely.
sure. We're not required to ask for it because it's on the list, but we can do it otherwise.
That's correct.
Okay.
So we will see this then in the middle of July?
Yes, we'll
Yes.
bring it back to direction to staff then.
That's right.
On the
So we'll bring it back on the 17th for direction to staff.
Okay.
Just a minute, I'm checking out on my
Still going through.
group notes here.
You'll have another month.
I
to
just
be-
gotta tell you guys what, this is an example of Paper Reduction Act going crazy. All these red lines to make this thing smaller, that'll be awesome. Our policy board book will probably be an inch less because of it.
We're hoping to keep working that to almost none someday. Slowly.
So on page 14, section 3714, I'm sorry, I bend my head down when I'm reading. It says, no city employee or any city elected official. Aren't we technically employees because we get paid, or,
No,
okay,
you are not employees.
okay, even though we get paid, we're not deemed.
Correct.
And so we have to have them, just throwing this out there, so we have to have that in there because we are elected to our positions and such, right? That's legally
Well, and
required,
yes,
okay?
Would you say it just helps clarify, Joel?
yes, that's
What was that?
what I'm going to say on that one.
What was that?
It's in an effort to help clarify the role, because there it is, depending on where, sometimes I've heard elected officials aren't city employees, and then sometimes I hear they are.
Yeah,
Depends what.
well, that's what I was,
It was taken from a different city, I believe, that one was.
okay. And then just so people know, page 17, 13-7-17, just give an example of what upfront cooperative and piggyback purchases, what kind of things would those be?
Well, one example might be fleet vehicles. That's a good one. The state contract provided for fleet vehicles for different agencies. I could have Heather come up here and explain that in more detail if you'd like, because she knows the differences between, sometimes there's differences between the two.
It just,
But
It just means
generally-
there's already been a public process done for these types
Yep.
of procurements, so rather than reinvent the wheel, we can piggyback on that public procurement and get the same pricing instead of having to do our own RFP.
So like our IGAs that we have with the county and the state, and with, I think, Maricopa County or Mesa, we might have even a very, especially with county where we do, never mind. Anyway, so that type of
It's
thing.
that type of thing.
Well, I've even seen our procurement group shop different opportunities. So they may see something that the city of Tucson did and the city of Houston. They compare the pricing of the two. Next thing you know, you'll have something in front of you that is a city of Houston bid. Well, how does that work?
Yeah.
But it's,
I think
we're able to,
We bought a
done that.
sweeper or something.
Yeah,
from
something
the
like that.
Houston contract, so.
right.
Now, sometimes the
Yeah.
the contract language is different than ours, and so we might require a separate contract, even though we use their procurement process, because sometimes they don't have our law in it. And they say, well, Texas law will apply. Well, I can't let that happen. That's, sorry, Mr. Captain Freeman, but sometimes we still have to have a separate contract, but we can, then we also reference that bid
Yep.
or whatever, from whatever agency it came from.
Sounds good.
Are you finished?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Okay. So we'll see this in the middle of
We're gonna have a
July?
short meeting.
Correct.
but-
So we'll see this at again, as council director staff, please feel free to reach out to us. If Matt or I don't have the question right away, we'll check in with Heather probably, or some of our department directors who deal daily on procurement. But this is an effort to process improve and to continually improve to be more effective in our efforts.
Okay. Presentation and discussion on proposed resolution number 18-23, authorizing the city to enter into an intergovernmental agreement for data access and exchange of information between the AJPD and ADOT. Captain Freeman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, city staff, and fellow citizens. Tonight, I'm here to propose to you an intergovernmental agreement with ADOT, Arizona Department of Transportation. They are currently shifting their priorities in crash reporting to electronic submission. With that, we will need TRACS software, TRACS, Traffic and Criminal Software is what that stands for. The software will not cost us anything. However, we have to have an IGA present with them. It's information sharing. The crash data will be electronically uploaded to ADOT. Electronic citations will be uploaded as well. Track software is traffic and criminal software is provided to us at no cost through ADOT. We will also qualify for a grant that will pay for additional expenses up to $25,000 to transition to the new software. Any questions?
Wow. So this is both traffic and criminal software?
Yes, ma'am. The traffic part of it is what we would be uploading as just crash software at this point. There's other agencies that would upload criminal software or criminal data, but we have with the new TriTech software that we purchased, it's not going to be compatible to upload criminally. But statewide, very few agencies are going to do that anyway. It's focused on the crash, and it's ADOT, so ADOT wouldn't be the criminal side of it anyway. ADOT focuses on crash and traffic.
Is this picture a wrong-way driver?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think that sounds good to everybody. So we just stay up there. And presentation and discussion on proposed changes to Apache Junction City Code, Volume 1, Chapter 6, animals, et cetera. Different animals, pigs, everything.
Yes, sir. Attached, or basically in
Could I
front of you,
interrupt 1 second? Kathy, does it need to be in the public record that I read all that, or can I just do an introduction like I just did? I know on the shorter ones, is there a rule on something
Well,
like that where,
You don't need to read that entire text. That's for the benefit of meeting the open meeting law, but there's nothing that says you have to read that entire thing.
okay, thank you, sorry.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to hear you say pot-bellied pigs, though.
I did too.
Types of pigs.
Because the documents were not loaded to Legistar, I'm sorry I blew the Paper Reduction Act thing through this. I had to provide paper copies, and each of you have that at your station now. There are no fee increases with this recommendation.
Well, you're the
These are-
first one to come in with that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I like to lead with that. Yes, ma'am. Suggested revision highlights. Now, these are just highlights, and I'll go to the separate pages as we go through. First of all, it allows the city manager to convene a panel of city residents for a civil hearing in lieu of a citation for animal noise nuisance, barking dogs, things like that. We have a difficult time enforcing that ordinance. I actually have an animal control officer here, and I rely on staff and the public to give me feedback as to what works and what doesn't work. And right now, this doesn't work very well for us. It's very difficult to prove allegations. It's very difficult to have neighbors testify against other neighbors. So it's kind of a quandary. So this allows the city manager to, well, I'll just read it to you. Might be the easiest.
Yeah.
This is on page 6. Before an enforcement, 6-1-3 under noises, section B, before an enforcement officer cites any person for an animal noise nuisance under subsection A above, the complaining party must first agree to participate in a civil hearing process which shall be administered by the city manager. The city manager shall appoint 3 city residents who shall convene to hear the complainant's allegation against the offending party. The Arizona rules of evidence shall not apply to these proceedings. The panel shall allow both the complainant and the alleged offender to state their side and shall allow any evidence the panel deems helpful in deciding whether there has been a violation of subsection A. The panel shall make the determination within 5 calendar days after the hearing and shall make its findings in writing signed by all 3 panel members. The city manager shall send the written determination to the enforcement officer, the complaining party, and the alleged offender. The enforcement officer shall monitor the alleged offender's property for additional violations. Should the enforcement officer have probable cause through written witness statements that the noise has continued and it interferes with the reasonable use and enjoyment of the complaining party's property, and in what matter, the enforcement officer shall create a Class 1 misdemeanor noise citation and serve it on the offender. The matter shall be prosecuted by the city attorney's office. If found guilty of a violation of subsection A, or if the offender pleads guilty, the court shall impose a fine of no less than $1,000, 12 months summary probation, and 30 calendar days suspended jail. The court may also impose other penalties as it deems fit, including but not limited to the requirement the defendant use anti-barking devices on the animal.
So, what you're saying here is the complaining person starts the process of the city manager forming this committee, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And if that person doesn't want to do this, then that's the end of it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And if the panel finds this a reasonable complaint, what happens then? I don't see that portion. I mean, I see what happens if the enforcement officer finds an additional complaint, but I don't see what happens if, I see the city manager sends a letter of determination to the enforcement officer, the complaining party, and the alleged offender. And that's all. Is that it?
That might be a Joel question because he helped us write this section.
Thanks a lot.
Ooh, yeah.
That's it for the civil process.
That's it for the first time.
Correct, the civil process. And if someone doesn't want to participate, then a criminal citation will be written. The problem we have in court
That's
is,
if it's continued. That's not the first time around, though.
it's a, yes, but
So the first time around, if the panel finds the complaint valid, then the city manager just sends a letter to the guy that has the barking dog and says the complaint's valid, end of story.
correct. And then if
Okay.
they do not cease,
Then we monitor them more, and if it continues, then we go through all the
yes,
hassle.
there's no civil penalty attached. If you did that, I mean, there could be.
No, I just wanted clarification. I
But if-
found it rather ambiguous.
We could clean that up.
That would be good.
But if there was if you wanted a civil penalty, then if you want to go forward with this ordinance, we'd have to do the 60-day
No,
waiting
I
period.
I understand what you're trying to say here, but I
Okay.
think it got so long and convoluted that,
Well, it kind of has to be because this is a different way of doing things. And it's more of a, and the animal control officer could tell you how complicated these cases and how
even
hard they
having
are.
a separate paragraph would help.
We can do that. We can break it up.
Just break it up.
We can break it up. And once again, it would just be kind of a finding by the administrative panel. And essentially, they're being told, okay, we found that you have a problem. If you continue, this gets a lot worse. And then it will not be a civil citation. Because if you do that, then you're stuck with the $250
Right.
fine, the $500, and
Right.
the $750. Instead, it goes straight to misdemeanor.
Yeah,
I will clean it up.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brian, how do you anticipate selecting 3 people?
Yeah, that was my question.
Yep,
I'll work closely with Captain Freeman, and we'll make sure that we get folks who are from the community that are willing to participate in this process. This will be new for us, an opportunity to try something different. We have struggled over the years on these types of cases. Any thoughts on how we could
people from the leadership.
get leadership, CLI?
You have a
Would be
whole
great.
list of people from there.
So would that change per need, or would that
That's
be
what
a
I-
seated panel?
I don't think we need to seat them. Are they seated? We
Doesn't
probably-
have to be.
I mean, each one you'd form a new,
New committee?
kind of like a grand jury, you get a new one every time.
Oh,
I
the
have a
city,
suggestion.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt, Joe, I'm sorry.
no, I apologize.
So with the county, there's called a restorative justice panel through the juvenile
That's right.
court services. I served on it for probably 14 years. So would it be possible to put a panel together like that so that it was consistent rather than just picking people out of thin air randomly? Does it come up often enough to warrant having a panel first?
So do you have any guess on how often? I mean, this will kind of... over the years, we've set up these types of panels, and I keep thinking there's going to be lots, and everybody says, city manager this, city manager this. I mean, I think I've had one cargo container one. Remember that one? And I just don't know what this will do. Or maybe this will help folks resolve their own concerns before it gets to here, but would love any thoughts on that, because
Council, let me introduce Officer Christopher Sheehan.
Good evening, Council. The problem with the enforcement of noise complaints laws is that it's frustrating to all the parties that are involved. Enforcement officers can write a citation, but unless they've actually witnessed the violation, which means sitting outside of a house for an hour listening to a dog bark, they have to rely on the testimony of the complainant. And the average citizen doesn't understand what constitutes proper evidence. And so we end up with testimony that relies on hyperbolic statements, and that fails to prove their case. On the flip side, oftentimes these are neighbor disputes. And in these cases, both parties are frustrated with one another, and they feel that the police department isn't getting something done. So this change in legislature is our attempt to do that, to help assuage these frustrations. The purpose of the laws is not necessarily just to punish, but it's to ensure security and to foster harmony in the community. By putting this power back in the hands of the community to solve a community problem, we're going to try to affect that change. We're going to bring the disputing parties together, not in a trial situation, but in more of a mediation situation. That way, with the panel, they can discuss what the issues are. Then, if the panel deems that there was actually a problem, they'll come to a solution, terms that both parties can agree with. And then later on, if they fail to hold up their end, that's when enforcement comes in and says, okay, now it's a criminal matter. And that's where we're going to go forward with that.
You just brought another concern to me. You said that the average citizen doesn't understand the different laws and whatnot, which to me means we need a consistent panel, not just randomly picking a group of people each time we have a situation, because they need to be educated on exactly what you just said. So to me, it seems like it would be more beneficial to have a panel that we had ready to go.
I think I concur with you. The frequency that we'll have these panels probably won't be that often. Usually, it's enough for an enforcement officer to go and address the issue with both parties. A lot of times, we do get it resolved in the field that way, but there are these ongoing issues where both parties say it's the other party's fault. My dog doesn't bark that much. This person, you guys aren't getting anything done. And that's where we're hitting that wall, because then when we go into a trial situation, again, we don't have the evidence necessary to find for a valid complaint.
So then maybe if they didn't meet often enough, if there wasn't enough cases, is there something else in this city going on that we could use a panel like this for?
Cargo containers.
I mean,
We certainly can look at that, and we certainly could look at a committee. I think that if, depending on frequency, you can get someone that moved, or we could look at this committee, and there may be other places through the CLI, or folks who most recently want to stay active in different city efforts.
So you're looking at this to be, for example, it's going to be like an appellate court hearing where the three members sit and listen to the evidence presented to them. They don't have the authority to go out and investigate themselves or anything like that,
No,
right?
this is more an attempt to bring the community members together, to bring the two parties, the neighbors. They've got this dispute. Well, now we've got an independent committee that's going to hear both parties' sides and try to determine if there is an issue at hand. The rules of evidence aren't going to apply in this. If there are any other questions?
I like the idea of having.
Give it a shot and
Yeah.
keep you posted on how it's working.
Okay.
Yeah, I know over the years the vice mayor and I recently had a situation where we reached out to someone who we thought was doing mediation for us, and they're not. And so, I mean, this is an opportunity for us to take kind of that in our, control in our own hands in our own community. And we know enough folks, we can start reaching out and do a little process. It's a good idea.
So this is all PD. Some of this does cross over into code enforcement, like we had last week with the rooster, right?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Right, and there's some zoning issues and what's allowed on certain properties. Yeah, and I don't know how much Captain went into this, but this is actually an effort to bring back the code from where we changed it, remember,
Absolutely.
a year ago or so, so
Yes.
always trying to improve, right, Captain?
Yes, sir.
And hopefully we learned something
Yes.
in this process.
so when will we talk about this again? I mean, how?
Well, so this is now, we would need another this is just the initial discussion. Captain, will we be ready in a month to come back for direction to staff?
Sure.
Okay.
So
So at our next meeting in a
same
month?
time,
Yep.
1 month from now.
There's a couple other major changes if you'd like me to go through them. if you
Yeah.
don't. Okay. Okay, if I could draw your attention to page 9, 6-1-8, personal dog kennel permits. Item number A, number 3, Class 3 permit. This has proven to be problematic. We actually have a neighbor in attendance tonight that has had some issues, and it's been an ongoing issue. Her issue was resolved, but we do need to close the loophole in this. We currently have 2 Class 3 permit holders that will be grandfathered in, and once the attrition takes place with her animals, with both their animals, they will not be renewed. So, okay, the next major change would be 6-2-3.
What page?
And that is on page 15.
Oops, excuse me.
One of the issues we have when the police department makes arrests and there's an animal in the car, if they're repeat offenders and they end up not getting bonded out or not going or not having any relatives that want to get involved, then we're actually, I don't want to say stuck with the animal, but we're responsible for that animal. It is, by the state of Arizona's definition, property, so we're taking care of their property in perpetuum. So that has become a major issue. It doesn't come up very often, but again, if we keep one animal for 6 months, we have the kennel issues that start taking place. They get aggressive. It puts staff at risk. So the proposed change for this is in the case where an owner has been arrested and any animals on premises have been impounded due to an absence of a qualified caretaker at the owner's premises, the enforcement officer shall make reasonable efforts to notify the owner of the impoundment. The notice shall allow the owner to claim the impounded animal through the efforts of another person as made known to the animal enforcement officer in writing. In such case, in order to obtain release of the animal, all fees referenced in 6-2-5 shall be paid to the enforcement officer by the person with the authority to receive the animal. If the enforcement officer is not notified by the owner that an authorized person may pick up the animal within 5 working days from the delivery of the required notice to the incarcerated owner, the animal is deemed abandoned and shall be handled pursuant to 6-2-6. We've actually delivered notices to people that are incarcerated in the county jail. So even if they're in jail, there's a way we can physically provide them with a notice, and then it's up to them to call family members, make arrangements to have the animal picked up.
Do you think 5 days is enough time to do that? That by the time you contact them, say they can't make a phone call, I think when they're in jail, they probably have to collect calls or something, say they don't have anybody they can collect call, but what if they have to go through the letter writing process, the snail mail? Is 5 days really enough, do you think? Is that?
I think it is, but that's, you're the policymaker, so if you feel like we need more,
got a
then
weekend in
absolutely.
there.
We'll enforce whatever you deem necessary.
I just wonder if maybe a couple days wouldn't, the idea is to get the dog out of impound with the family so that we're not incurring costs and whatnot.
Absolutely, and we don't want the dog to deteriorate inside the kennels by being locked up for forever.
Could we make the wording 5 working days?
It is 5 working days.
Okay.
Would you like to say 5 business days?
I consider working days and business days the same, meaning taking out Saturday, Sunday, and holidays.
Right, that wouldn't be counted towards the 5
Yeah.
working days, 5 business days.
Do you want
Maybe
5 city working days?
Yeah.
Because the animal control has different hours than the city hall.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, we had this discussion last fall, or when we were talking about some other policy as to what the working day within the city, because the city really never stops working.
Or you could say, forget about that, and we'll just do calendar days.
Or, yeah, do 7 calendar or 10
Or 10 calendar days.
Can make it 10.
Yeah,
10 calendar days.
Okay.
Yeah, 10 calendar days would be better. That way there's no argument on the working and what isn't.
that's reasonable. I think 10 calendar days is reasonable. Anybody else? Or, yeah.
Okay, the next one would be 6-5-2. Currently, we have no protocol for recovering the cost of animal care when an animal is taken from an unoccupied motor vehicle. That's on page 20. The owner, this is 6-5-2. The owner must also, at such time of return of such animal, make current all licensing and vaccinations and pay all associated fees incurred for the city's care for the animal.
What is our cost per day?
I believe it's $10 a day.
Is that enough?
We think so in terms of just the daily upkeep, but if we have to take the animal to a vet because of its dehydration or for whatever reason, the owner needs to pay that cost. That shouldn't be our responsibility.
Absolutely.
This can sometimes be controversial too, though, because you'll have somebody with a door open, a window down, say, I was only gone 5 minutes, he was tied in, he had hair. So I guess my question is, what happens prior to that to bring the animal into our custody?
Well, recently we had a situation where Officer Sheehan, I believe, was the officer on scene that we got a call from a person that observed a dog inside a car. Officer Sheehan carries around an infrared thermometer with him, and I believe he tested the vehicle at 112 degrees inside the vehicle where the dog was. So obviously the owner was cited. He was inside the business. So it rarely happens, but when it does, we need to have that ability to recover any fees if we have to. So. Okay, the next one is clarifies jurisdiction and quarantine of pot-bellied pig bites. You knew it was coming. It was just
I did.
page 22, 6-7-4, biting pigs. We're basically eliminating.
Us biting pigs or pigs biting?
Right. Basically, we're eliminating that section and proposing that in situations where it is alleged a pot-bellied pig has bitten a person or animal, the enforcement officer shall report such incident to the Arizona Department of Agriculture, which would have jurisdiction, which pursuant to ARS 11-1014 and Arizona Administrative Rules R3-2-408 have jurisdiction over pot-bellied pig bites to include quarantine and rabies testing.
Have we had pot-bellied pig bites?
No, not really.
Do you know why? I have 13 of them. I rescued potbellies for about 25 years. They can't bite you because of the shape of their mouth.
Okay.
The only way a pig would bite, you'd have to put your hand in the pig's mouth. He can't get you because of the shape of his mouth.
Okay.
And it's my understanding that they can't contract rabies, which is what makes them such wonderful pets.
We're actually just correcting.
I was gonna say, I'm sorry.
Ma'am, we're actually just correcting previous verbiage that was in there that said it was the officer's duty to quarantine an animal that bites. Any mammal can contract rabies. We don't really worry about it too much in livestock because typically it's only in carnivorous animals, carnivorous mammals that we do see an exposure or we consider a vector. However, the previous verbiage stated that it was the city enforcement officer's duty to quarantine the animal, and that's against state law. It's actually the Department of Agriculture, so we do have a responsibility to turn it over to them. That's just why that was altered.
Possums can't get rabies. Even if injected with rabies, possums don't get it.
There are
Not that-
also,
Not that they're noticed, not that they're native here.
right.
Didn't mean to throw you off.
Okay, and the final one would be 6-9-2. It adds clarifications and terminology to criminal filings and penalties. That's on page 25. We actually added a little bit of verbiage up front, just the 24, including the parentheses. The city attorney's office by long-form complaint or the enforcement officer by direct citation, a minimum probation period of 12 months and maximum of 36 months. A minimum suspended jail sentence of 30 days. Now, these are for criminal filings, not civil, so. 30 days with a maximum of 180 calendar days. The court, instead of the judge, the court shall treat subsequent successive civil judgments as the same manner. Again, the court, this is just some of the language we cleaned up. The court has no discretion to lower these penalties and shall sentence the individual to at least the minimum sentences noted above. Under 6-3-3, running at large may be pursued by the enforcement officer as either a civil or criminal matter in his or her own discretion based on previous violations and contacts with the alleged offender and the alleged offender's quantifiable remorsefulness and willingness or lack of willingness to mitigate and eliminate future violations. We have a lot of repeat offenders, and this will help the enforcement side of it. Now, you never want to give the enforcement side absolute authority. So with the bottom sentence, with all of the above code provisions, the city attorney's office has the discretion to reduce a misdemeanor to a civil in the interest of justice.
So basically, if somebody's willing to work with you and figure out how to get that dog contained, finally, they could reduce that.
Stop digging under that fence.
I do have a question, and I don't know if you can answer it. This has come up to me recently about a person's dog was in their front yard that's unfenced, but on their property. Is that considered a dog at large?
That is considered a dog at large. The only cities that I'm aware of that wouldn't be considered at large would be Paradise Valley and Guadalupe. And as having worked in Guadalupe for quite some time, I can tell you that's not a good provision to necessarily, to say if the dog is in his yard, even if there's no fence, well, the dog's in my yard, so it's not at large, because all it takes is the neighbor's cat to go walking by, that dog's out there, and now you've got an accident waiting to happen.
So as long as the dog is not on a leash or somehow controlled, if it's just loose, it's on your property, no fence, that's considered at large.
Correct.
Just want to
Yes.
clarify it for people out there in TV land so they understand.
And
It-
is there a height requirement of a fence, or, I mean, how?
There's not a specific height requirement, it just has to be able to confine the animal.
Yeah.
If you were required to put a 6-foot cinder block wall for a Chihuahua, that might be a little extreme.
Yeah.
For a pit bull, different story.
Yeah.
But it does depend on the size of the dog and the animal's athletic ability, but
Yeah. Yeah, because I got labs, and when they were younger, they actually or climbed over a 6-foot
Oh,
fence.
easy.
well, every situation is different. We do take into those those variables into account, I should say.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Any other questions?
We're having fun with pets tonight.
It's a new canine
I
officer.
love it.
You're gonna get me in trouble.
Any questions?
Get used to it.
So we'll see this in a month. Brian, do you have anything to add?
For direction to staff in a month, that's correct.
Okay.
And then we'll bring it back in August for possible.
And if there's any additions, please let me know or let Joel know, and we'll certainly work it in. Thank you.
And the last thing, discussion relating to shade structures for horses. I was contacted several weeks ago when it just started to get hot of a horse off of Tomahawk out in a pen with absolutely no shade. And we looked into it, and Chip and I, you have the list of cities that do have this. No, I don't. Well, you mentioned a couple that do. And we think it'd just be a good idea to have something on the books. We don't want to make this really complicated with so much shade for each horse or whatever. Even a tree, I think, would help. Just have them some access to, or an awning or something, in case there is, 120 degrees and you've got a horse out there in a pen. How do you handle something like that? Chip, I know you talked to the horse community, and they were at first alarmed that we're going to shove stuff down their throat, which we don't want to do. We just want to make sure that there's some kind of a tarp structure or something to give them a little bit of relief.
Well, when I talk to the horse community and also in my experiences as well, in the aspect that, and I've received a lot of complaints over the years on this, and according to, say, the state statutes right now, there's no requirement. But, and of course, and I'm going to relate the story of just happened yesterday when, or no, excuse me, it was today, driving by facilities that has horses, and they have a shade structure, but out in the middle of the yard, there's a single Palo Verde tree. The two horses that they had were standing underneath the Palo Verde tree, even though it was in the middle of the sun. And one of the things that we had talked about in the aspect is, number one, not making it an area where you have to have the horses under shade, because horses make up their mind in the aspect. They will actually stand out, and I have an all-black miniature horse that even when it's 118, 120, will stand out in the middle of the sun. flies don't bother him, even though he has the ability to go into a shade. So, you know, if we did something, it would have to be worded so that that shade is made available, whether natural or man-made. If it's less than 120 square foot man-made structure, it does not have to have a permit, so we're not requiring a permit in the shade structure. It would just have to meet the setback requirements for the property lines, things like this. So, and the horse community has said that as long as it's not a mandatory that the horses be kept underneath shade, that, and of course, if they also included natural shade, that they would not have a major problem with this. In fact, several people have already contacted me and said that they actually like the idea of having it made available for the animal. The animal will make the decision on whether or not they're going to be underneath the shade or not.
Yeah. I've since learned that white horses are more susceptible to the sun than black horses are because it
Yes.
burns right through their skin.
Yeah, the white horse will actually get sunburned.
Any input on this?
I
Yeah.
just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
A question, you said there's some cities that do this already?
Now, there is a couple cities that have,
Can we get examples of their ordinances?
I'll look to see if I can get it, yeah.
Be a good place to start.
And there's the ones that I know of that have it, they don't even require, you know, a set size. They just say that, they should have shade available, be made available for the animal, whether natural or man-made. That's where I got those words from.
Just think jackrabbit in the shade of a telephone pole.
You know, and I agree that you can provide all kinds of shade and cover for them, and they'll go stand where they want to stand if it's out in the blazing sun. And I just don't see the point of putting anything on the books that is no more than a recommendation. I get it. I hate seeing the horses out standing, but the wild horses are out running and standing at high noon and high sun, and some of them, they don't like it, and if they want shade, they'll find it. I just don't see the point of
Yep.
saying
You just said
anything.
they can find shade, though.
Well, if they want to, sometimes they don't care. I think it's, as a horse owner, I think it's nice to provide it, but to make it mandatory in a very broad sense is it's something that we can't enforce, correct? We can't say you must have shade. So to put something on as a suggestion, I guess is what it becomes.
But if we get complaints like we did, then we can say, well, there's nothing we can do. That horse is on its own out there. So this would give a little bit of teeth to go talk to them.
Do we have anything on for dogs outside in the yard?
Yes.
I believe we do,
Yeah.
actually.
So it can mirror,
What is the language, Captain Fremont, or? For dogs, for canine? Shelter. Come on up, come on up.
Dogs that are kept outside do have to be provided with shade or shelter of some sort and potable water at all times.
so we could say the same thing for a horse.
You could, but horses and livestock have different requirements than our domestic animals. And the Arizona Department of Agriculture is usually who determines the rules and regulations regarding that. To turn it into a city issue, in my opinion, would probably cause more headaches for enforcement than we would like to have. As it is right now, if we do get complaints about shade, we can defer to the Arizona Department of Agriculture, and I have had in recent history complaints about horses being blanketed too late in the season. I can go out and speak to an owner about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then if it seems like there's a larger problem, I can then defer to the Department of Agriculture because they have the means to enforce that as well. They have a task force that can come in, and if there is an issue, they can remove animals, whereas we'd be burdening the city and its resources as it is if we were to enact something in the municipal code.
So
So,
At least that's my opinion as one of the animal control
well,
officers.
so if we had something in our regulations referring to that code, but because if it's not enforceable, that's a piece I don't like to have it, just to have it.
As it is for us, when those kinds of complaints come in, that's what we do, is we'll refer them to the Arizona Department of Agriculture, especially for most livestock issues. We'll go out, we'll make first contact, and the same with Department of Game and Fish with wildlife issues, which isn't our responsibility, but if we can be the point of contact so that a citizen knows it's being addressed, we'll make that effort. And that's one of the benefits of having a small community, a small town. We don't have to get involved in the legislature aspect of it, but we are able to be that point of contact and then get those people pointed to the right organization that can help them.
So I mean, in essence, we have animal endangerment regulations already on board, like you said,
Yes.
with the Department of Agriculture. So if somebody is misusing a horse, leaving them without water, they're becoming, there you go, the big word I was trying to look for. You guys would do the initial, or PD would do the initial contact and then refer it to it already.
Typically, if they don't contact the Department of Agriculture themselves and they call the police department, we will go out there first, and then we'll assess the situation as, and see if it needs further looking at.
Right.
And then we have contacts in the other agencies that we can refer them to, and they're better equipped to handle some of those situations. Or like with livestock, with wild animals, they have the authority over us.
Yeah. It's kind of like Mr. Stern was talking about earlier about common sense. Hopefully people who own livestock animals in general have enough responsibility and respect for them to take care of them the way they're supposed to.
We would hope so. I think one of the things, though, we have to remember about legislation is we enact the legislation as a bare minimum, because that's where it becomes criminal. If you're doing this, it's a criminal act to your animal.
Yeah.
It's not how a reasonable, normal person might treat their animals. I'm not going to chain my dog up outside all summer. Some people might. There are junkyard dogs. Some dogs live and thrive in that kind of environment, but how we as individuals treat our animals is going to vary from person to person. But what the legislation does is make the bare minimums a criminal act.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I think if the Department of Agriculture has this handled, I think maybe we should leave it to them. And if we do have questions about it, we can defer to them.
I was not aware that they had an enforcement side. Where do they come from? Are they in downtown Phoenix, or how do they?
I would have to look that up. Actually, Representative
When
Councilman
you have
Wilson
called, they're
could probably
very
tell you better than I
responsive,
could.
though?
Pardon?
When you have called, they're very responsive quickly?
They tend to be, yeah. Well,
Chip said,
Well, you have to remember, there's 8 enforcement officers for the entire state of Arizona from the Department of Agriculture. And it depends, when the complaint comes in and where the officer is and what he's involved with at the time.
and I agree with the fact that they have to triage their calls. They're spread very thin, which again, where we come in as a point of contact, we can assess the situation. So my contacting Game and Fish, say, is going to get, I don't want to say it's going to get a faster reaction, but I'm going to be able to legitimize the complaint.
And you are, in the aspect of it's coming from the city, it's going to be response quicker than it would be a general, person calling in.
Exactly.
but just on that same, if you get called to or horses, and you can look at it and you say, wow, this horse is about done, because it's 120 degrees out and there's no water. Do you, without calling the Department of Agriculture, have the authority to remove the animal, or?
I do.
Okay.
I do. There are animal cruelty laws on the books,
Yeah.
both state laws and city codes that I can enforce. It would be easier if I got them on board because they have the resources.
Yeah.
But I do have the authority, yes.
did you have some?
I do. So I think part of the problem is we have a community of people that own large animals, horses, burros. I don't own horses, I own burros, same thing. And you have people that don't, that see these animals out there in the sun and they think, oh my gosh, that poor horse. I'm in the same exact situation. with the boroughs. I have trees, I have a built shade structure, and I don't ever see them standing under any of those. In the rain, in the sun, they have it provided for them. And so my concern, like Vice Mayor Wilson had mentioned and Councilmember Evans had mentioned, is making it a requirement. You know, I don't mind looking at it. If Chip wants to come back with maybe some ordinances from other cities, we take a look at it and consider it. But I don't want to make it a requirement either. I think there's just a misunderstanding from people that don't own and have large animals themselves that are mixing with people that do.
And in the summer, I go out on those calls all the time, and usually we can handle it.
Well, and I'm going to throw this out in the aspect, the number one complaint for the Department of Agriculture is that from we as horse people, we blindfold all our horses, fly mess. Number two complaint that they receive, and I mean this is a year that they receive every year, and that is no shade.
Yeah.
So I mean it's the second leading complaint that they get on it, so it's something that's been, you know, they address all the time. And yes, they are tasked with going out and responding to, you know, true situations that they need to be done. But again, like you said, they have to triage the complaints, and I guarantee you, anyone calls in on a blindfolded horse is not going to be responded to at all. But as far as others, once you, say the city calls in or law enforcement in the aspect on it calls in concerning it, they do get a quicker response.
And so the point of this would be to help the city do that, it sounds. Yeah.
In addition, we also rely on the Horsemen's Association. If we have a question, if we can't get a hold of someone at the State Department of Agriculture, we'll have them come out and say, hey, what do you think? We've also called out vets in the past to have them take a look at the animal for malnourishment or something such as that. So we have a lot of avenues that we can go down. We could also do maybe a press release, maybe an education type press release for livestock, if you'd like something like that to be done. That's relatively simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are a lot of people, like I said, just, they don't understand. And they think, gosh, it's so hot. Yes, it is hot out, but these are outdoor animals.
Right.
They don't need blankets in the wintertime, they're not people, so.
We'll throw the one out that happened here not too long ago when there was an individual calling in, and they called me up instead of calling you all on it. And over in the Walmart parking lot, there's an individual that's has his miniature horse, and he was exposing his miniature horse to traffic and people in the aspect on it because he wants to expose the animal to it so the horse will understand that people are not out there to hurt it. Well, he's running around in the parking lot in the, I'll say, the eastern part of the parking lot, and then comes around, and I get 3 telephone calls from people saying, it's hot out there. Now, mind you, the temperature had only gotten up to 80 degrees. They said, this horse is running around on asphalt. It's burning the bottom of its feet. This is terrible. And, you know, those are the series of complaints that happen where people don't understand, and I understand that. And that's one of the things that the the Superstition Horsemen's Association said that as long as the wording, if we did something, was that it had to be available, but only available, and it had to include natural. Because, just like I saw today, the horses had the ability to go into a full-size shade and covered, but they were standing underneath that mere Palo Verde tree. And the reason why they do it is the flies don't bother them.
So is everybody satisfied then that Department of Agriculture can take care of this, and we do have enforcement procedures? So,
Yep.
Chip, if you do, maybe just for our benefit through Bryant, if you could find out what these other cities have done,
Okay.
just so that we can help educate the public.
Okay, will do.
Okay. And with that being said, we'll be adjourned until tomorrow.
Kathy, I do like the new format.